Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Chandra Sanders, the founder of Heels and Hustle, which is a platform that's focused on how experienced operators convert what they know into ownership in this evolving and changing economy. Thank you for joining us today. We are live streaming from LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So, wherever you are joining in from, we thank you for being here. This series is called Built Different, all right? Because right now, we are not just seeing changes in work, we're seeing a shift in how people think about success, how people think about alignment, and how people think about what actually matters. More people are asking different questions, right? Not just what should I do next, right? But they're asking, does this still fit? Is this how I want to spend my time? And is this aligned with the life I'm trying to build? And those questions don't always come from a place of crisis, which many of us are in crisis right now, right? They come from a place of clarity, oftentimes. So, from outgrowing something that once worked, today's conversation sits in that space. Not just not just the decision to change something externally, but the internal shift that makes that decision unavoidable. So today I am joined by Beth Lingard. Hi, Beth. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for joining. So let me just give you guys a rundown of the exceptionalism that is Beth. All right. She
Mhm.
has spent 2 decades operating inside complex organizations across product, project management, and UX research. And most recently, as a UX research director focused on at Meta AI. At the end of last year, she made the decision to follow her energy and build Lingard Strategy Studio, where she now works with AI startup founders on product market fit. Most recently, she also completed a death doula training and is continuing that path alongside co-authoring a book on UX research in the age of AI, which is extremely important during this time. She's also a 3-time Ironman finisher and endurance coach. So there is a clear through line of discipline and pushing limits when it comes to Beth. But across all of it, her work is anchored in one thing, and that is leaving the world better than she found it. So, Beth, I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Me too.
So, of course, so I want to start here, all right, because I think this is where a lot of people are right now.
Mhm.
What was the moment, or maybe was it a series of moments where you started to feel like the path you were on no longer fully fit?
Yeah. It yes, there was a series, right? It wasn't as easy as like a one-time thing, but I had these sort of moments where I had this little voice in my head where I'd be working on things. I'd be like, "What is this for?" Um, and I started to get a little itchy about, is there something else that I could do? And I remember initially when I had that itch, I was like, I'll just look for another job in the same kind of role because that felt very comfortable. And I knew how to do it. But I, there, it felt, I was excited about some of those opportunities, but I wasn't like, a hell yeah, this is great. I'm so excited. And I remember, we went on a little summer vacation where we just went someplace kind of chill and relaxed, and everything slowed down just a little bit. And I remember starting to think like, "Huh, what if I did my own thing? What if I just, like, was, like, done with the corporate life, just go do your own thing?" So I started to think about that a little bit more, and, it started to appeal to me a lot more. And honestly, I would, when you'd catch up with your friends, they'd ask me what was going on, and I'd be like, "Well, I don't know what I wanna do next. I'm kinda thinking about this," and I'd talk about the different options I had on the table. And, I remember every time I would talk about maybe doing my own thing, I would just light up. I would just and, like, my friends noticed. They'd be like, "I think you need to do your own thing." And I had one friend say to me, "You know what, Beth? Like, why not take a bet on yourself? Why are you gonna go bet on somebody else's company? Bet on yourself." And that got me really excited. But I also I just wanna be very real, like, I had moments of like, I don't know, this risk feels too heavy. Growing up, I experienced some financial insecurities, so I like having a paycheck, I liked having health insurance, That's all very important to me. And the fear of not having that was scary, very scary. And I remember talking to one of my friends, and she was so great at like hearing me out, but then also being like, look, you know how to work, you know how to do things. You've never shied away from a challenge before. What makes you think that you would shy away from this? Why not just try? You can figure it out and you will figure it out, and you have the power within you. And I heard her, but it took me a little bit of time. I had to marinate, I had to seep in deep down inside, and it took me probably a couple months to really feel that. And so at that was kind of like the series of things that kind of happened. I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's take this risk. But like I said, I had to let it marinate. I had to talk about it with like a handful of people, and I had to believe it.
You had to believe it. You had to bet on yourself. You actually had someone in your ear motivating you, right? Because we
Yeah.
can kind of get inside of ourselves and fall
Yes.
prey to those negative thoughts or the what ifs.
Yes.
But you created an environment of motivation and of
Yeah.
inspiration and of, like you said, marination
Mhm.
to ensure that you were making the right decision. And I think that is, very important. So that kind of brings me to my next question.
Mhm.
Um, so from that point,
Mhm.
right, there's still kind of like a gap in recognizing that something is not aligned and actually doing something about it. You made the decision to
Mhm.
follow your energy and build something on your own.
Yeah.
So of course you had the environment. You didn't make this decision on your own. You did, but you had some external forces, but you
Absolutely.
also believed in yourself. So what does following your energy actually look like in practice for you?
Yeah. That's a good one. I mean, honestly, there's a couple things. I think like when I look back on my career, I've had a bit of a jungle gym career. I never really was just like set on a path and going for it. Many of my jobs, I would argue, like fell into my lap. But when I talk to a lot of my friends, they're like, "No, that you kind of manifested that." But I think part of it is I've always just been like, "That sounds interesting. That sounds cool. I want to learn more," and that's kind of what has been like the spark for me. And I think um you know like I've had a lot of different roles. Like when I first got out of school, I was working in some type of marketing roles, and then I found a startup, and then I was like, oh, that sounds really interesting, and I originally applied for a marketing role, ended up in customer support, and then next thing I know, I'm asked to do a usability study, um, and just like kind of like snowballed, right? Like into all these different kind of careers. And I love the startup world because there's so much energy and like flexibility, and it's like all hands on deck, just figure it out. And I love that, right? Because it totally fuels my curiosity and my lets me kind of play in my in this space and like see what I like, see what I don't like, see, really recognize my strengths and also my growth
Mhm.
areas, right? And so I'm so grateful to have had that kind of experience. And so when I get in these like moments of like, that sounds interesting, I want to learn more, I almost have this like play like momentum behind me where it's like fueled with curiosity, like what could I learn? What could this mean? And like I just get so excited. And I think the excitement kind of helps trump the fear because I think
Mhm.
the fear is real. It's
Mhm.
very real. So I want to recognize that. And so I think what really has helped me is that reframing of like, there's this opportunity. This ambiguity is meant to be figured out. This like there's this great opportunity to learn. And so even just having that reframe really helps me tamper the fear a bit. Because yeah, especially like with people losing their jobs and like all this talk about AI taking our jobs, like I mean, I don't know about you, but sometimes I look on LinkedIn and I'm like, oh my God, why did I
I
even
know.
go here?
I know.
Right? And
Yes.
so I just really appreciate that sort of I think the excitement and the play comes on really strong, and I love to dial it up because I think that just it just kind of keeps me moving in a direction. But so going back to like building my own thing, I started that space was critical. So let me just put a plug into taking your PTO, take your
Mhm.
vacation days, and if you can't do that, or maybe you've used them all up, try to build some practice in to like have some space. Like one of the things I love to do is go for a run and I just let my mind wander. And while it's wandering, like all sorts of things just start bubbling up for me. Sometimes I work through problems. Sometimes I come up with ideas of things I should try or explore. Sometimes I just am like listening to my body and just like feeling the run, right? But all of it feels like it gives me that space that I need sometimes to start looking at problems differently. But I would say find your space, make that space. And I started thinking about like, what do I love to do? What are some of the times where I've been my happiest? What are my values? And how could I live my values more? And so I started to kind of settle on going back to working with startups, that intersection of product and research, because to me, the best part of building a product is like understanding
Yeah.
people, learning their stories, amplifying those stories for them and advocating for them, and then building something that actually like solves a problem they have
Mhm.
or makes their life a little bit better. So that's kind of where I wanted to spend my time. And so that kind of like birthed the Lingard Strategy Studio part of it. But one of the benefits to like going out and doing your own thing is just having a lot more flexibility to like explore other things. And so around the time that I was making the decision to like, take that leap, my friend and mentor, former manager, reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you want to write a book together?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I would love to," because I love writing. I love
Yeah.
working with her. And so we started down this journey of writing a book. And a total side effect to my consultancy is it was almost an afterthought, but I started to see how writing this book could actually benefit my consultancy too. And so that was just like a really beautiful thing. And again, I'm like thinking, wow, how lucky am I? This just fell into place. But again, I'm reminded by my friends that are like, no, like you're living your values, you're following your energy, and everything's falling into place because you're doing those things. Um, and that's when I started to explore the death doula stuff too, because I was like, I have space to do this now. And I'd first heard about it from somebody I used to manage who's just this amazing coworker. And just in a one-on-one, it organically came up when he was training to become a death doula. And I was like, wait, what? I was like,
What?
I don't
Mhm.
what is that? And so the more I learned about it, the more excited I got about it. And so I'm just so fortunate to have been able to do that. But yeah, and so I started to follow it. I went to a training in early March, so not that long ago, and have just been kind of like pulling on that thread to see where it takes me.
Mhm, mhm. I think this is so important because, you have always been, from what you have said, right? You have always been someone who is open to something new, and like you may call it falling into something, but just exploring, right?
Yes.
Exploration. Let's see what's out there. And it has definitely, benefited you, right? In work and in play, right? And in life. And I feel like now, since I'm having all of these conversations with women who never thought about building something of their own before because they never had to. And now they're having to rewire their brain to play,
Yeah.
rewire their brain um, to create, rewire their brain to and just to have space because they've never had to do that. They've always been super high powered. We're just
Yeah.
going to keep, pounding the pavement. And
Yeah.
now when all that comes to a full stop due to possible layoffs or whatever it may be, what I'm finding is a lot of women, men as well, are kind of getting stuck in that, what do I do? But you have pushed through
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. I mean, I, I mean, again, I think I have these moments of like, like going back to like when I was sort of like, I need a change. It was like,
Hmm.
what is this for? Like, if I'm climbing a corporate ladder, what is it for? What it like, how am I living my values? How am I like, and when I live a purposeful life, I feel so much energy. I'm so excited. I love that feeling,
Hmm.
and I feel so connected. I feel connected to, like, friends and family and community
Hmm.
and, ancestors, right? Like,
Hmm.
I feel so powerful too, and I love
Hmm.
that feeling, and I'm like, "How do I get more of that?"
Purpose and power, it goes together, right? And so I do also feel like a lot of people found their purpose in their job.
Yeah.
but their purpose is so much larger than that. So this is really a great time to, in this evolving economy, with all the things that are happening, to really tap into your actual purpose and bring forth that power, which
Yeah.
brings me back to your death doula work.
Oh, yes.
Okay, because this is so special and so
Mhm.
important. And, you know, before chatting with you last month, I hadn't heard of it. And now, like, I'm seeing it different places. And so
I
let's
know.
kind of talk about this, right? Because
Yeah.
this adds a completely different kind of like dimension to the conversation, right? You recently completed your death doula training that someone mentioned to you, light bulb went off. You're like, what is that? Okay, I'm open. Let's explore.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what a death doula actually is. And I just want to, yes, let's talk about what a death doula actually is.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest kind of definition is to say it's like a birth doula, but on the other side, right? But I feel like that just does not do it justice because it really is a space where, yes, you are talking about death, dying, grieving, but you're also talking about legacy and you're talking about, connection and community. And a death doula is still kind of like a relatively new, it's not a new career. One of the things that we were talking about earlier was just how it's probably the oldest career because people have been dying since we started existing, right? And somebody has always kind of helped a person leave the world in some way, shape, or form. I think with modern medicine, it's been kind of hiding a bit more of people dying in death, right? Because people die in a nursing home or they die in the
Mhm,
hospital. And so they're not dying in the home like they used to.
mhm,
We have modern medicine to keep people alive longer and have these interventions and things like that. But so what that does is it takes it out of our face a bit more. And so there's this kind of going back to your roots movement, I think that's happening. And you see that with like, things like palliative care and stuff like that where it's about helping people have a better quality of life. And so when I think of a death doula, I mean, it's funny, when I went to the training we talked about like what's one word that describes it. We came up with like a list of like 50 things. I mean, it was
mhm,
crazy. But it's everything from helping you think about the end of your life to planning to your legacy. What legacy do you want to leave, to dealing with the grief, to supporting your circle of care, which could be friends, family. It could also mean, helping you organize so that, like, when you do pass, the burden isn't falling completely on the people who, your family or whoever's caring for you, to helping you think through your funeral and your basically the immediate after death, like what
mhm,
happens to you.
mhm,
So it's this wide range of opportunities, and that's why I'm kind of like marinating on like, what am I going to do here? Because I feel like I definitely want to incorporate it into my life. Sitting vigil with somebody while they're actively dying is certainly
yeah,
one way that you could be a death doula, but there are so many other ways. And so some of the threads that I've personally been pulling on has been around grief. And there's this really great book I'm reading right now called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. And he talks about our relationship with grief and how historically, for millennia, like we have dealt with our grief in community. But in modern society, it gets pushed over either into isolation or in the spotlight. Like if you think of a funeral and a grieving family, and so he's trying to bring this back to like grieving in community, because when we grieve in community, we make a little bit more space for our grief. We
mhm,
can look at it a little more objectively. We can take the burden off our shoulders for a little bit. And let's be honest, like grieving in community, like I can't think of a more vulnerable thing. So if you're being vulnerable, you're going to drive more connection and community, right? And so I think there's some very wonderful things that could happen by doing something like that. Again, I don't know where this is going, but I'm very intrigued by it.
and that's the beauty. You don't have to know, right? Like, you
Yeah,
don't have to know. You don't know where you're gonna be needed,
no,
pulled
no.
to,
Yeah,
led.
exactly, and that's what I'm like, so I'm just like, I'm looking at these things, I'm like, I like something about that, I wanna learn more about it, so I'm going to a grief circle next week.
Wow.
Very excited to, like, experience it, and we experienced a little bit of this when we were in our, death doula training, but I haven't done it in a circle with like multiple people. We did it more like one-on-one with a partner. So very excited to kind of see where this leads. Another thing that I've been really interested about is legacy, and like, what is the legacy that you're going to leave? And that's something that I feel is incredibly creative. It's incredibly personal, and how cool it could be to kind of help somebody think through what it is. And it could be something as like big as like a movement, sort of like the ghost bikes or the AIDS quilt, but it also could be something just as simple as like writing a letter around a sentimental item and passing it along to somebody, right? When you pass away. And so I think there's so many things you can do here. And it just seems like such a fun and creative outlet. And then of course there's the sitting vigil with somebody. I really want to see, can I do this? I was so lucky to be with my dad when he passed. And so it was such a beautiful moment, and I loved it, but I'm like, can I do this with somebody I don't know? I don't know yet. So I feel like
Mhm.
I'm gonna take some steps to like volunteer in hospice, or maybe at an
Mhm.
elder care facility or something, and just try to learn as much as I can. But as I talk about it with other people, they're like, "Oh, you should talk to this person. You should talk to that person." And I'm finding my network of like, elder care, death care, end of life planning, like friends. And so just learning as much as I can and seeing where it leads me.
I think this is so important. And let me just share something. So I am coming up on, like, in 2 weeks, I'm coming up on the second anniversary of my mom's passing.
Mhm.
Okay. And so um, for her, it was a 6 week cancer battle. Like,
Oh,
from start to finish, we didn't even know she had cancer. Like,
mhm.
6 weeks here and
Oh,
gone. And so, of course, she was at home and surrounded by her sisters and brothers and husband, kids, all the things. But to have someone there to support you through these things, because, especially something that just happens so fast, you're not thinking about legacy. We weren't thinking about anything because there was no time to even process what was happening.
mhm.
So I definitely believe we could have used a death doula during that time, because everything was just happening so fast. There was no time to process from here today and gone tomorrow. But to have had someone there to support us and help us think clearly, because there was literally no thinking clearly for anyone at that time.
Yeah.
It was insane. So to hear what you're doing, the support that you are having, and the care that you're providing during, just something so special, is just one of the most beautiful things that you could ever do for someone during that time.
Yeah. Honestly, it's such an honor though, right? When you think about being able to help somebody leave this world and their family, and to like think about it, like when your mom was dying, you probably were in this emotional, like
Mm-hmm.
heightened state. And
Mm-hmm.
so have somebody who can just kind of come in and like help you think of the things that you might
Mm-hmm.
want, or to like talk about before, or to do right after.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a hard time, and everybody responds differently, and everybody's death is unique, right?
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
so to have somebody just kind of meet you where you're at and be present with you and help you think of the things that you might need to think about,
Mm-hmm.
or connect you to the right resources. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what a gift, right? And what an
Yes.
honor to be able to like be that guide.
Mhm,
So,
mhm. Yes, it's definitely an honor. So we literally only have 5 minutes left, and we can
yeah.
probably talk for hours. Like, I know we could, but I want to, kind of bring it together. I want to bring, your experience together, what you're building now, your perspective from all the work. How has your definition of success evolved?
Oh my
Like, from what you thought success was 10, 15 years ago, or even 20 years ago, to what success is to you now.
Yeah. I mean, when I first got out of school, it was all about survival.
Yes.
How do I survive?
Mhm,
Um, I would say that probably, there was always like this desire to be some kind of somebody.
mhm,
But I think I've always had this inkling that I wanted to do something with purpose. And when I think about my values, like they've been holding pretty strong for a while. And I think sometimes when you're like, um, you're in the thick of something and you're not making that space to think, you're not thinking about how things might be shifting around you and your values may not be realized. And I think I kind of got to that place where I was like, am I still living my values? And that's where I think that like for what kept coming up for me, that question. But I would say that I I've always wanted to live my values. So I would say that was always like a success measurement for me, even if it was quieter when I was younger compared
Mhm.
to where it is now. Now it feels incredibly important to me. I don't have that many more years left of working. And so I want to make everything that I do extremely purposeful. And when I think about like what we talked about, like leaving this world a little bit of a better
Mhm.
place, am I doing that? Am I living that value? Like, am I living in like for me, my values are community and connection and like learning and growing, and like not being right, but getting it right, as
Mhm.
my favorite author Brene Brown always says.
Mhm.
um, I really want to like live like a principled life, and I want to be a model for my son and anybody else who's paying attention, right?
Mhm.
And so if I can't live that, then that's kind of like a good indication that I'm not living successfully. I would say, um, so for me, that's just gotten much louder. And then one of my friends had said to me, and so when I think about like I do need to make a living, I do have to like feed my family and pay my mortgage and things like that.
Mhm.
But I think about what my friend said, because I always have these little moments of doubt, right? Where it's like, oh my God, can I do this? And my friend's like, Beth, focus on the value. Just focus on making value and the money will come. And so that has been like one of my mantras like this for the last like 6 months or so.
Yep.
Just like focus on
Mhm.
value, focus on
Mhm.
adding value and the money will come. So I
Mhm.
would say like my definition of success is dialed up on the values and really trying to live that.
Mhm.
And that to me, that's the most important thing that I can do right now.
I love this so much. And so, if there's one thing that I'm taking from this conversation, which I've been taking notes the whole time, so I'm taking more than one thing, right? But it's this, right? We spend a lot of time building careers, but not always enough time asking if they align with what the life, if they align with the life that we actually want, especially the life that we want in whatever stage you are in, right? So sometimes, the clearest signal is the quiet realization that something needs to change. We have to make sure that we're paying attention to those signals in life to ensure that we are, on the right path.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you for sharing how you have followed your energy, how to follow your energy. If you're not sure about following your energy, how to start. And
Yeah.
that's leaning into yourself, taking the space, taking PTO, going for walks, all the things to ensure that you're able to get those downloads for yourself so you can tune into your purpose and your power and move forth, especially in this type of
Yeah.
evolving, changing society slash economy, right? And so you are such a wealth of knowledge
Oh,
and
thank
inspiration, and your energy is definitely magnetic.
you.
So how can people get in touch with you?
Oh yeah. Definitely feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I am active on there, even though it definitely like, like I said, the feed can fuel the fear.
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
you do reach out on LinkedIn, just let me know that you saw me on the live stream so that I know where you're coming from. And then feel free to reach out to me. I do, if you want to like learn more about my consulting or even just talk about death or dying, I'm happy to chat. So on my website, Lingard Strategy Studio, you can book a calendar, a 30-minute calendar session with me. So that's always an option too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Like I said, this conversation has been truly amazing. I'm so happy that you joined us today. And so, you
Thank you.
guys, we're going to continue these conversations. Beth is going to continue doing her amazing work. Thank you guys for joining us today. And so, we'll see you next time.
Thanks to you.
All right, bye.
Bye.